Okay. All right. We're looking at the Church of Philadelphia. So turn with me to Revelation 3, and we're going to look through verses 17 through 13. Philadelphia. Does anybody have any idea what Philadelphia means? City of brotherly love. There is a city here in the United States called Philadelphia, and it is called the City of Brotherly Love. However, there is no brotherly love there. But, and I'm going to say that because the Philadelphia Eagles are there. But we're talking about the Philadelphia here that's over in Turkey at this moment. It is called the City of Brotherly Love because philos in the Greek is love, and then Delphia or something is brotherly. This city was the youngest of the 7 cities that have been mentioned in the book of Revelation. And it was founded by the king of Pergamum, Altulus II. Just think about having that name, Altulus II. And Altulus had a brother, and the brother's name was Emenes II, and they were close-knit with each other. If you were to look at some of the coins from this area, they were also minted with both of their faces on these coins side by side. And so they were kind of inseparable from one another. And when they were in this area, the Romans tried to get each other they tried to separate them. They tried to put a wedge in between their relationship, and because they really only wanted that one king over in that area. However, Altulus was very faithful to his brother. He was so loyal to him that he was nicknamed Philadelphus. His nickname was Philadelphus, which means the lover of one's brother. And so he was actually the one that started this city. And so they named it after him as well. So this is the city of Philadelphia. This area where it was situated, if you were to look at it on a map, and you'll see that map in the videos as we've seen before, you will see that it is on top of Turkey, that whole region. There was a lot of seismic activity that happened, very volcanic area. And of course, during volcanoes, when they erupt and things, they lay down a lot of ash. And so the soil there was very, very rich for one particular product, is what they were very, very well known for. It is fermented grapes, wine. They were known for their wine. They had lots of vineyards around there. So it was favored for their wine production. And in fact, Dionysus was the god of wine, and he was their principal deity at that time, where they kind of worshipped him, because he was producing all of this wine for them, is what they said. Philadelphia, because of its location, it was situated amongst several trade routes, main trade routes, and it was almost dead center of this trade route, and so it made it a very, very prosperous city. You can imagine at that time period, in about 186 BC is when the city was founded. And with it being situated on this trade route, people had to stay at places. And so they had goods and services that they they gave away there. And because it was right at the cornerstone or a intersection of some of these trade routes, it was known as the gateway to the east. It was the gateway to the east. And because of this gateway, the city was strategically pushed in growth by the Romans as a kind of like a missionary type of a city. And the Hellenistic people that were there, the Greeks that were there as well, started to push their culture amongst everybody that came through. So this was a missionary type of city, and they were very well received. And in fact, when the Hellenists were starting to push their Greek culture, they started to also incorporate their language, push their language of Greek to these people that were coming through. The Romans started to accept the language of Greek, and they kind of preferred it over Latin. Why do you think they preferred it over Latin? I have no idea, but did you know that Greek and English are somewhat similar when it comes to the consonants and vowels in the structure of the language? We kind of incorporate some of our stuff from the Greek language. And the Greek, Koine Greek, which was the Greek that the Bible was written in, not modern day Greek, but Koine Greek, that language, there are 24 consonants, or 24 letters in their vocabulary. How many letters do we have in the English language? 27, I think. 26, 27. I went to Pewitt. Is it 26? 26. Okay, 26. I'll go with that. Let's go with that number. A, B, C, D, F. Okay. But if you were to look at how it's set up with the Greek language, the first 4 letters in the Greek language are alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. Okay? Alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. A, B, C, D. Okay? And it's kind of set up that way. But the Romans started to incorporate the Greek language into their everyday lifestyle. And it was primarily because of these Hellenists, these Greeks, were starting to push their language out. And along with the language comes their culture as well. And we've seen it in the past that the Romans, they had their own gods that they worshiped, but they also incorporated a lot of the Greek gods as well. Y'all remember that word that I taught y'all last week? What was that word, Jimmy? Hermeneutics. And that's just a fun way of studying your Bible. The good thing about this is we need to learn our history. And I'm going through some college classes right now with the great courses. I suggest you, if you have Audible and you are on this plan of 1 book a month, invest in some of these great courses. I'm going through the Roman Empire right now, the rise and the fall of the Roman Empire, and learning that history from them really kind of illuminates, this is why Paul was starting to say this to the church in Corinth. This is what was happening at the moment. And so with that, we can start to see, and it starts to open up our eyes to the whole New Testament. And right here with the Greeks coming in, we can see that they are starting to push their culture into the Roman Empire. In AD 17, there was a great earthquake that happened there. We mentioned that last week with Sardis. We had said that earthquake happened in AD 17, and it tore It basically tore Sardis apart. From the writings of a couple of historians that had lived back in that time, they said that the epicenter of this great earthquake happened in Philadelphia. So the city was once prosperous because of their wine and all that. It gets devastated. It gets clobbered because of the earthquake. And in fact, that earthquake left about 10 to 12 cities crumbled, either totally demolished or they were destroyed in certain ways. They were heavily damaged. This earthquake was so large that those same historians said that they were recording tremors, aftershocks from this earthquake almost daily for 20 years. For 20 years. And this is important for us to say it because we're going to mention in this letter there's something that's kind of could be alluding to that. But after this earthquake and after the 20 years of the tremors, in AD 40, there was another earthquake in the town of Laodicea. What is Laodicea? That is the very next city that we are going to look at next week. These earthquakes caused a great panic, and because they were destroyed, the Roman Empire came through and decided, hey, for 5 years, you don't have to pay taxes to us. You can be free from taxes, and we are going to help you rebuild. And because of that rebuilding that they had helped, a lot of the towns decided they were going to name things after their emperors. You know, the emperors were kind of considered as their gods at that time. And so Philadelphia was going through the same type of thing. They're thinking, well, we're getting all of this help, so we need to honor those that came to help us along. However, there was an emperor by the name of Demetrius. He came along, and Philadelphia's main export was wine. It was doing so well that he said, you can't compete with our Italian wine. So he ordered them to cut down half of all of the vineyards there. And he said, you cannot replant any more vineyards. So it caused a lot of stress to this city, and they were considering renaming their town from Philadelphia to honor the Roman Empire. However, if we were to do something here and, the government were to come in to help us out, and we're like, man, thank you so much, we're going to rename our town after you. But then they said, no, we're going to take away your main export, your main goods. That's going to leave you a little sour taste in your mouth, right? They're going to feel rejected. And so they never did really rename their town. There have been some historians that said that they renamed their town a couple of times afterwards. And as of today, in 1392, the Turks came and invaded that area, and it has almost been destroyed by earthquakes, and it has now renamed Ala-Shahir, which is called the City of God. Okay? Do y'all understand a little bit of that? Keep that in the front of your minds as we start to read Revelation chapter 3. So we'll start in verse 7. And to the angel of the church of Philadelphia write, the words of the Holy One. Let's pause right there. Remember, every single letter kind of goes off to some characteristics that Jesus had mentioned in himself in chapter 1. However, in this letter, He didn't mention himself as this. Jesus goes in a different direction. He renames himself and says, the words of the Holy One. What does holy mean? Holy, kind of what we talked about, actually we talked about truth Sunday, but holy is one that is absolutely perfect, set apart. And holiness refers directly to God. And in the Old Testament, if you look at Isaiah chapter 6, verse 3, and I have that up on the screen, he says, I can't even read it. Oh, and the one who called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is filled with his glory. Jesus is calling himself holy. And all through the Old Testament, when holiness is mentioned, it is mentioned about God. But then in the New Testament, it is named, as Jesus has been mentioned multiple times in there, as the Holy One. It is a messianic title to Jesus. So this is Jesus' claim that he is God. Just another one of those claims that he is God. His divinity. Then he says, the true one. So the words of the Holy One, the true one. Truth is used in combination with describing God as being holy as well. What is truth? What is it? The opposite of falsehood. All right? It is the opposite of falsehood. And in the midst of this perversion of lies and false gods and other things that were being mentioned there in the ancient days, Jesus says he is the truth. Remember on Sunday it said he claims himself as he is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through him. He is truth. So Jesus not only claims to be God, but he is also reinforcing that he is the way and the truth right here. He is the truth. Who has the key of David? What in the world does this mean? What could this mean? Who is David? David, we know, was a king who was in the line of Jesus. And it's a messianic type of an office. David held a messianic office with him. The key in Scripture a lot of times represents authority. There is, if you have a key to your house, there is only one. If there's only one key out there, there's only one person that can get into your house, right? Legally. One person that can get in your house legally, right? Because you hold the key to your house. Jesus is saying that he is holding the keys of David. Now this is very, very interesting. It is mentioned, this exact portion is mentioned in Isaiah 22. But before we go right there, let me finish this verse. Who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one will open. Now let's go over to Isaiah chapter 22, and we're going to look at verses 20 through 25. In that day I will call my servant Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, and I will clothe him with your robe, and will bind your sash on him, and will commit your authority to his hand. And he shall be a father of the inhabitants of Jerusalem and to the house of Judah. And I will place on his shoulder the key of the house of David. He shall open and none shall shut. He shall shut and none shall open. And I will fasten him like a peg in a secure place, and he will become a throne of honor to his father's house. And they will hang on him the whole honor of his father's house, the offspring and the issue and every small vessel, from the cups to all the flagons. In that day, declares the Lord of hosts, the peg that was fastened in a secure place will give way, and it will be cut down and fall. And the load that was on it will be cut off, for the Lord has spoken. Let's revisit verse 22. And I will place on his shoulder the key of the house of David. He shall open, and none shall shut, and he shall shut, and none shall open. Let's revisit Revelation chapter 3, verse 7. He who has the key of David, who opens, and no one will shut, who shuts, and no one will open. Isaiah 22 is talking about Eliakim. Eliakim was kind of the guard over the house of David at that time, and he held the keys to allow anyone to be able to come and visit David. So he was the gatekeeper. If you held the key to David's house, you had access to visit the king. Jesus, right here, is saying, I hold the key to the house of David, and no one can come through and see the king except through me. Who is this king that Jesus is basically the gatekeeper for? The Father. Yes, God the Father. Here is Jesus saying that he is the way to the Father. Right there. And he used an Old Testament story that these people would know. He is the gatekeeper. He is the one that holds the direction of salvation. The one who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one opens. He is the one way, the truth, and the life. That's fascinating. And it's really fascinating if you kind of know some of your Old Testament history and know this. And because Jesus was writing to what we would call Christians, but they're Messianic Jews at this time, Jews that believe in the Messiah, they would know the Old Testament. Verse 8. Here is where Jesus starts to commend the church in Philadelphia. One of the interesting things about this letter is this is one of two churches in all of the book of Revelation that have no concerns from Jesus. There is no concerns from Jesus to the church in Philadelphia. And he says, I know your works. What are those works? We say that before. Your works that you're doing for the kingdom are not going unnoticed. He says, behold, I have set before you an open door. What is this door? Throughout Scripture, we see there are multiple doors sometimes that are mentioned in there. Think about Noah and the ark. There was one door with Noah in the ark when the animals came through. Who was the one that was able to open that door and shut that door? God was. We see the tabernacle. And in fact, a fun fact that we're doing today is actually Yom Kippur in the Jewish tradition and the holidays. If you know anything about Yom Kippur, it is the Day of Atonement, the day where the high priest could go into the tabernacle and make a sacrifice for the nations. When we look at the tabernacle, there is one way in and one way out. It is the door. And Jesus is telling them right here, I have set before you an open door. We use this a lot in our own talk, in our own Christianese language of saying, if God opens up a door, we'll go through it. This is an opportunity for this church to do something. And because we will see a little bit further on right here, it says, I have set before you an open door which no one is able to shut. When God opens doors for ministry opportunities, there is nobody that can ever shut that door except for yourself. Nobody can come against it. Now, a lot of times God will shut a door and we try to open it. When God shuts the door, it is closed for good, just like the ark. When he shut the door to the ark was sealed. No one could come in, no one could go out. But a lot of times we try to make our own way when the door is not open. Christ is the one that opens doors for ministry opportunities and for whatever else in life it is. He is the one that opens doors. And when he opens them, no one is able to shut it. He goes on and he says, I know that you have but little power. And to us, in this manly day and age, we might see that as, I'm small. I'm weak. We may see it as a weakness. But Jesus is commending them. He says, I know that you have but little power. And this could mean that either one, they were a small church, or they had a little, not a lot of influence there in Philadelphia. But we see it again, we have little power, but God knows the works. God opens the doors. And so this is a commendation, thank you, a commendation from Jesus to them. And yet you have kept my word. They have kept the words of Christ. Remember, this time that was around, the New Testament had been fully written. It hadn't been in a book form that we know of today. But the letters were circulating through the areas, and they were probably having the teachings of the apostles that were there, and they have kept the word of the Lord, and they trusted in him through all of this. And you have not denied my name. In a time period where there were a lot of external pressures that were pushing upon them, it would be easy for them to kind of give into it, give into the pressure, kind of compromise your beliefs so that you can just get along with everybody else. But God is commending them and saying, you may think that you're small, you may have little power, but you have kept my word. You have been faithful, and you have not denied my name. Verse 9. Actually, let's go ahead. I'm going to read verse 9 for you, and the first part of verse 10, and then we're going to circle back to those. Behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. Behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I have loved you, because you have kept my word about patient endurance, and I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming upon the whole world. Something very, very interesting that I want to point out. Jesus commends them 7 times in this letter. What does the number 7 represent to God? Completion, holiness, completion. And where are the 7 ones? Well, number 1, I know your works. He is commending them for their works. Then he says, I have set before you an open door. That is one. And then, but you have little power, and you have kept my word, and you have not denied my name. And I will make them, in verse 9, I will make them come and bow down before your feet. And then in verse 10, the 7th one, because you have kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of the trial that is coming to the whole world. 7 ways that Jesus is commending this church. Let's just have a little bit of fun, okay? Have a little bit of fun with this. There are 7 of these. How many churches are there? 7. Okay. How many days are there? What is God's perfect number? This is very, very interesting. Okay? When we get a little bit further along in Revelation, how many years of tribulation are there? 7. So for some odd reason, I'm not a numerologist type of a person that looks through all this stuff, but for some odd reason, God loves and uses 7 to them. Perfection. Why? Because He is holy. Now, let's circle back to verse 9. Behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. What is a synagogue of Satan? We've seen it once before in a letter to the church in Smyrna. Well, let's look at Romans chapter 11, and we're going to look at verse 11. The Jews, when Jesus came, the Jews turned their backs on Jesus, right? They did not recognize Him as the Messiah, and in fact, they are still looking for the Messiah to come almost 2,000 years afterwards. So there's a lot of jealousy that the Jews have started to have. And in the synagogue of Satan, in the Jewish synagogue that was there, they denied that Christ was the Messiah. So anything that is not right from Christ is what? Of Satan. So he calls them the synagogue of Satan. And so the Jews started to be a little bit jealous, starting to get jealous. And we can even see that jealousy today. But let's read Romans chapter 11, verse 11. Sorry, Lou, I didn't put 12 in there, I don't think. But we'll look at verses 11 and 12. So I ask, this is Paul writing, did they stumble in order that they might fall? By no means. Rather, through their trespass, salvation has come to the Gentiles, so as to make Israel jealous. Now, if their trespass means riches for the world, and if their failure means riches for the Gentiles, how much more will their full inclusion mean? The Gentiles becoming saved brings jealousy upon the Jews. And we can even see that today with the jealousy of the Jews that they have towards the Gentiles. Now, this is just my thoughts, okay? This is just my own thoughts. But it's very interesting that the Israeli prime minister that we have, Benjamin Netanyahu, will come and he'll use scripture when it is convenient to him. He will use the words of Jesus and in Christianity when it is convenient for him. But he is not a Christian. He is of Jewish origin, of Jewish faith. And through this, we can even see this past week when he was meeting with President Trump and they were announcing this peace deal that they had going on, he used a Bible verse that was totally taken way out of context, but he used it so that he could get a little bit of support from Christians. And in December of 2024, during Christmas time, he posted a video commending Christians and wishing everybody a Merry Christmas through there. Even though he does not believe that Jesus is the Messiah, but he is using Christians to get kind of what he wants. And so there's a little bit of jealousy through the Jewish religion that the Christians have that access Why? Because of Romans chapter 11, they disregarded Jesus as the Messiah. And God says, okay, I'm going to have another people that come about, that I'm going to be grafted in to the vine. Now remember, I'm not knocking Netanyahu that we should not support Israel. I'm not going that way, okay? I'm just saying he's a politician. Exactly what it is. But the Jews even today are jealous that we have access to the Father. Direct access to them. And so when Jesus says right here in verse 9, he says, behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I have loved you. He's saying to these Jewish people that they are a part of God's chosen people. That the Gentiles, I've opened access to the Gentiles to be able to come and worship me. That is what he is saying. In verse 10, because you have kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world. Do you remember our very first session that we had about the book of Revelation, the introduction that I gave? I told you that there are 4 different views on how to look at the book of Revelation. And 2 of these views I'm going to kind of mention tonight. One of them is the view that I hold, and the view I think we all should hold on the book of Revelation is it is a futuristic book. It is a prophecy. It is a prophecy. And this is where the letter gets kind of tricky to the church in Philadelphia, because it was hitting at things that were happening to them right then and there, but it's also mentioning things that are to come, that are going to happen. Then there's another view that just sees this as a historical book, that it was just for them at that one moment. So in AD 95, when it was written. And so everything that was written after, with this book had to correlate with the destruction of the temple in AD 70. I do not hold that view at all. I believe that this is a futuristic book. And so now we come to a portion in this letter where Jesus is talking about the future. Talking about a prophecy. Because you have kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world. What in the world do you think that is? What was that? The rapture. This is a good case for the rapture. We see another good case for it in 2 Thessalonians, where we will be caught up into the sky. But right here, Jesus is saying, I'm going to keep you from the trial. And why this cannot be a historical book, because the historical book would only mention that area that is going on at that moment. This is a trial that's going to face who? The whole world. The whole world. So Jesus is talking about the tribulation at this time. To try those who dwell on the earth. And Jesus says with those that have patient endurance, he is going to keep them from that hour. Well, what is that hour? We said it's the tribulation, but if you go to Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 through 27, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to read that for you, but write down those verses and go read them for yourself. This is talking about Daniel's 70 weeks, which is the 7 years of the tribulation that are going to happen. And so this hour of trial is the tribulation that is going to come to the world. And he is going to take them up. Interesting moment in this whole book. And this is where I kind of go off of what's called a pre-tribulation type of a belief where I believe the church will be raptured up before the tribulation happens. But if we do not go before the tribulation, well, we are called a mid-trib, which they're in the middle of the tribulation, the church will be raptured up. And then if we don't, we still are in the tribulation through the whole time, we're going to be a post-trib. So I'm going to start off with a pre-trib. So before the tribulation happens, the church will be caught up. It's interesting that the rest of the book after chapter 3 of Revelation, there is not one mention of the church in it. There's not one mention of the church through chapters 6 through 19. All the way through there. Not one mention. Because Jesus is going to keep those who endure for the hour of the trial that is going to happen. Now that is my belief of the pre-trib. There is another belief that is out there, and I do not want to put my beliefs onto you. I want you to do your own kind of research. There is a belief out there that says that this hour of trial has to come down to the Greek words and how it was translated. Okay? This does not mean that it's going to happen at the beginning, but the church is going to go through some of the tribulation, and then they are going to be taken care of. Or if they're going to go through the whole tribulation, that God will somehow miraculously keep the church and not harm the church. And they make a very compelling point, because they point out that in the 10 plagues that happened in Egypt, the first couple of plagues had to deal with all of Egypt, including the Jews that lived there. But the second portion of the plagues only happened to deal with the Egyptians, not the Jews. That's a very compelling point. But I am under the belief that God's going to save us from the whole trial. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. That's okay. Because then if he comes in the middle of it, and I just had a belief that we were going to be in the front, who cares? It doesn't matter when you're being raptured anyways, you know. It's not like, oh darn, you know, I thought we were going to be at the beginning. But no, it's okay. It's okay. But however, he is going to hold his church through this trial of the tribulation. Whether it's at the beginning, the middle, or the end, it doesn't matter. God is going to... Exactly, we won't. So now, verse 11. I am coming soon. Now, soon in God's eyes and soon in people's eyes are two totally separate things. Right? Remember, a day is like 1,000 years, or 1,000 years is like a day to God. Well, we may say soon as like one day, but to God it could be 1,000 years. But no matter what the time period is, he is promising he is coming. Hold fast to what you have so that no one may seize your crown. This is another portion of saying that you cannot lose your salvation. But what you can lose is your rewards that you are going to have. We can lose some of the rewards that we may have in heaven. Because Christ is saying right here, hold fast so that no one can take away your rewards. No one can take away the crowns that you're going to get. Hold fast. The one who conquers, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. Remember when I was talking to you about the earthquakes and I was hitting on that so much? These people in Philadelphia would understand what a pillar means. Because at that time, there were cracks and stuff all throughout the foundations of their homes and through the foundations and the pillars of the temples that were there. And God is saying, I am going to make you stable. I am going to give you that stability, that firm foundation when you get to heaven, when you conquer through this. I'm going to make you a pillar in the temple of my God. Never shall he go out of it, and I will write on him the name of my God. Pillars in the Roman Empire and in Roman architecture a lot of times would have an idol, I would say an idol, but it would be an engraved monument to one of their gods or their emperors on top of the pillars that are holding up the temples and the buildings that they would have. And sometimes they would even have names written on them. And so these Christians in the church in Philadelphia would understand that pillar, that Christ is going to write his name on their hearts. He is going to write them on their pillar. He is going to give them a new name. Remember when I was talking about Philadelphia and wanting to change names and have new names? Christ is writing to them, to the understanding that he is going to be the one that puts a new name. And the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem. Jerusalem will Christ is going to come and physically reign in Jerusalem for 1,000 years, for a millennium. That is the city of God, which comes down from my God out of heaven, and my own new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. This was the church in Philadelphia. They had no concerns. They had a bright future ahead of them. They were a mission church, even though they might have been small. They were still having an impact on changing lives there in the town. And God says, you're going to conquer. You are going to continue. And I am going to give you stability. When right now you might be feeling these tremors in your life, these earthquakes in your life, I am going to give you that stability. And I am going to write on him the name of my God. Now you are going to see in this video, the guy gives a good alternative to that interpretation of what I just said. And I think either one of those could be correct. But I do believe that Jesus was talking about giving them stability amongst the earthquakes that was there, because they would recognize that. And he would understand that said, when you conquer, you are going to be a pillar in my kingdom. Any questions, comments before we move on? All right. We'll take a look at this video.